Hello and welcome to the Week 15 NFL matchup analysis. Tanner and I are on today to go over all of the Week 15 matchups with you guys, except for Thursday Night Football, which happened last night, and it was a stomping. The Raiders ran away with that one, and we still got a scoregami, surprisingly. 63-21, Raiders won. Tanner, how's it going today?
Pretty good, brother. Pretty good. Feeling pretty confident about stuff we're going to tell the viewers. Couple surprises, but nothing that I think's going to stand out too much, except for maybe the Chiefs Patriots game. But
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Well,
excited, man. It's week one of the playoffs, so
yeah, it
what's
is.
there not to be excited about?
Hopefully people have a bye. If you're listening, you probably don't have a bye. And let's get right into the first matchup off the bat. This game is actually tomorrow, Saturday morning, the first matchup on Saturday. There are actually 3 games on Saturday to be aware of. The first of which is Minnesota at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is favored in this matchup. And really, I think you're going to want to start the studs now. I'm not too high on starting Jamar Chase as he had a dud last week, boomed the week before. He's kind of been boom and bust all year. I think he's boomed in 5 games and busted in 8, so not great. If you have better options, maybe lean that way, but it'd be hard to go away from Jamar Chase. I have him as a start. I actually have him as a wide receiver 2, not a wide receiver 1, so he's not a must start in my opinion. I think Justin Jefferson should be locked in your lineup. It looks like he's going to play. Ty Chandler is going to be the running back in Minnesota, so he's going to get all the volume. So I think you need to play Ty Chandler if you can. He's a running back too with some upside. Volume is key in fantasy football, and I believe he's going to be getting a lot of volume. I think you're also going to start TJ Hawkinson and Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, I downgrade a little bit. Chase Brown has actually been taking touches away from him. Chase Brown had 19.5 fantasy points in PPR formats last week. That's good for running back 10 on the week last week. He surprised some people. He is a rookie, and I think he can do really well again this week. I actually have him as a sleeper along with Jake Browning. I think the Vikings defense could cause some issues for the Cincinnati offense. The Vikings defense coming off a shutout last week of the Raiders. The Raiders actually were shut out last week and scored 63 points this week, setting a franchise record. Unbelievable performance by the Raiders last night. They really wanted to win that game. Tanner, what do you have for Vikings at the Bengals?
Yeah, the Raiders scored more points in the first half of last night's game than they did throughout the entirety of any game this season. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, we knew the Raiders defense was going to have top 3 potential without Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert, Josh Palmer coming off IR and stuff like that, but didn't expect them to have, what was it, 2 touchdowns and
Yeah.
28 fantasy points. That was pretty cool. Going to this game, though, I think on my sit radar, I've definitely got T. Higgins. He's done nothing. He's had maybe 1 or 2 good games all season long. Last week, the catches were minimal. And look at the matchup. The Vikings have allowed only 1 touchdown to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, including the 6th fewest fantasy points to the position over that time. Definitely think sit T. Higgins. I know I've been talking about that over the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much all I have for this game.
Yeah, I don't think you should play. Nick Mullins is the starting quarterback for the Vikings. You should not play him. There's definitely better options out there. And another guy I'm not too keen on playing is Jordan Addison due to the fact that Nick Mullins is the quarterback in Minnesota. I really love Justin Jefferson, though. I mean, he's finally back. Hopefully, he stays in the full game this week. So, yeah, I think that's all we have for Viking Bengals. Let's move on to Pittsburgh at Indianapolis. So, this is going to be the second game on Saturday. So, make sure you guys have your lineup set tonight. And the Steelers at the Colts. Pittsburgh, man, there's not much to love about them. Mitch Trubisky hasn't looked great. And really, I think you're only wanting to start the running backs in this game for Pittsburgh. I kind of like Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Colts defense has not been great against running backs. I think if you have to, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson are wide receiver 3 flex plays, but I'd rather go to different receivers if possible, like Jaden Reed, who I really love this week. And then as far as Indianapolis, Zach Moss, I know he hasn't got it going, but I mean, maybe this is the week. We said it last week. He didn't do it. They're going to need him to step up. And I think they lean on the run game, kind of like New England did versus the Steelers to start last week and got Zeke going. Zeke did really well last week. I think Zach Moss could do well this week, and he's an RB2 in my mind with RB1 upside. Michael Pittman should also be a lock in your lineups. And then Colts defense. I actually like the Colts defense this week just because Mitch Trubisky has not looked great. And if they're trailing the Steelers, if they're trailing in this game and have to go to the passing game and can't lean on their running backs as much, that could cause some issues and cause some turnovers to happen with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. I also think you should sit Josh Downs. He's just not showing us anything. And Gardner Minshew, I'm not too keen on him this week, but maybe he's a sleeper if you are in a deeper league. Tanner, who do you like in this Colts and Steelers matchup on Saturday?
So on Pittsburgh side of the ball, I like Najee and Jalen Warren a lot. Najee specifically, he hasn't been great the last couple of weeks, but for the second half of the season, a majority of the time, he has been producing for our fantasy teams. He's got a good matchup versus the Colts. They've allowed the fourth most fantasy points to running backs overall and the third most points since week 12. So I think you can start both Najee and Jalen Warren. Pittsburgh's or on Indianapolis side of the ball, I think you're going to want to sit Gardner Minshew. Not that I think anyone in the playoffs is going to be starting him anyways, but scored fewer than 15 in all but one of his last 6 games. And I think that trend is likely to continue against the Steelers, who have given up just 5 touchdown passes and an average over 12.8 points per game to QBs in the last 4 weeks. I think Gardner Minshew is a super flex at best.
Yeah, in those deeper leagues, 2 QB leagues, I could see going after him as a start, but it's hard to get around to starting him, especially if you've made it this far. I doubt you have Gardner Minshew as your starting quarterback, like you were saying, Tanner. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you have anything else to add on this game besides that?
No, but just as a reminder, like talking about the Vikings game, like there's no point in mentioning like TJ Hawkinson. Like we know he's a
Yeah,
top 3 start. So just
yeah,
to remind the viewers, we're just kind of going over the underground, the low key guys, if you will,
yeah.
the
Kind of
tough decisions.
some guys that you'd overlook or wouldn't think of, and
Hmm.
yeah, like you said, tough decisions that you're debating. We really don't want to cover the must start guys. It's pretty easy to lock those guys in your lineup without hesitation. Well, let's
Hmm.
move on to Denver at Detroit. So some stuff I got for this game is I think Detroit kind of gets right in this game, even though Denver has looked very good as of late. Detroit is back at home in the dome, so they don't have to worry about weather conditions. And I like starting Cortland Sutton in this matchup. The Detroit defense has not looked great against wide receivers, quarterbacks. They've allowed a ton of points over the past couple weeks. I think you got to start Cortland Sutton. I actually like him a lot this week. So the Lions defense has allowed 8 touchdowns to wide receivers in the last 5 games. And Sutton has scored a ton of touchdowns. I think he has one in almost every game this year, and I don't see why Russ looks away from him in this one. That they're probably going to need a pass. I think Detroit gets it going on the ground, and I think Gibbs and Montgomery get going in this matchup. I think we get that 1-2 punch from them and try and get that run game established to play from ahead rather than play from behind. Detroit has been behind in the past 2 matchups to start, and it hasn't really helped them. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are locks in your lineup. You also got to start Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta. I think Javonte Williams is startable. The Detroit defensive tackle McNeil is out again, I believe. I think he's on IR. And I think, last week the run game for Chicago got going. I think that Denver can get the run game going with Javonte. Javante's look good. I think you also got to start Russell Wilson. Now, I'm lower on him. Maybe you don't have him if you're in the fantasy playoffs, but if you have to start someone and I kind of like Russell Wilson against this Detroit defense who's given up a lot of points, and I expect Denver to be playing from behind and throwing a lot. Some sleepers I like because I also think that Denver's be playing from behind is Samaje Perine and then Jameson Williams for the Lions, who has looked really good. I really think they need to start getting him the ball more and getting him on the field more. He's kind of a spark they need on offense. And I don't think you start either defense in this matchup. Maybe the Broncos as a surprise think that you're gonna shut them down or something, but I don't like either defense here. I think there's a lot of points to go around. And honestly, I wouldn't be too keen on starting Jared Goff if you can avoid it. If you have someone else out there, I think that they're just going to run the ball a lot. But I mean, it's hard to go away from Goff in this matchup. But I just think they're going to lean on the run and not throw it a lot. I mean, Jared Goff still could do pretty well for you, could have a top 12 game, but he is back in that dome environment, which helps him a lot. But I'm not keen on starting him if you definitely have better options. If you don't have better options, I think he should be a lock-in start for you. Tanner, what do you think for this matchup? Do you have anything?
Just I think Jared Goff's really, really, really good at home.
Yeah.
Really good at home. I have him at QB9. I was going to talk about that a little bit later. So I don't know that I would shy away from Jared Goff, but other than that, no, I don't have anything else to add. Just because he's so good at home.
Yeah, I mean, but if you have like Jordan Love, I'd rather play Jordan Love over Jared Goff. Sorry, I think Jordan Love's gonna have a good week. The Bucks defense is banged up, and they are not great against the pass. The Broncos defense has a good secondary, which kind of worries me about Goff and why I think they're gonna get the run game going. But yeah, you're right, Tanner. I mean, he is so good at home. It's hard to shy away from him if you don't have any better options. I think you're starting him, no doubt about it.
Mhm.
Then the next matchup is going to be Atlanta at Carolina. Atlanta's favored at this one on the road. And I believe the weather in this matchup is going to be a little hairy. So it's good for the run game and good for both defenses, but I'm not playing the Carolina defense in this one. I also think Drake London is a bust in this matchup. We saw a good game out of him last week, and I had him as a start in the flex spot. I hope you started him. But this week, I am really afraid. The Panthers' secondary is very good. And honestly, Desmond Ritter's home road splits are absurd. He's way better at home than on the road. And that affects Drake London as well. I'll get into Drake London a little more once we go over our top sits and busts later in this episode. But I'm starting Bijan Robinson and the Falcons defense in this one. I also wouldn't mind starting Chuba Hubbard. I'm sitting all Panthers receivers and both quarterbacks. A sleeper I do like in this matchup is Tyler Algier, just because I think that they may lean on the run game heavily in this one and get both running backs involved a lot. I think Bijan Robinson has top 3 potential this week. He's really good. I mean, there's no question you're starting him if you drafted him. You drafted him in the top 10 probably. So I really like the Falcons run game a lot. Not much else from this game besides the Falcons defense who can create turnovers. Tanner, what do you like in this matchup? What do you not like in this matchup?
Um, definitely don't like Desmond Ritter.
Yeah.
He went off last week. He put up 25.4 points in a loss to the Buccaneers. I wouldn't chase the points though. Carolina, the matchup with them is much tougher. Their defense has allowed an average of fewer than 13 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks at home this year. And they held Desmond Ritter to just 8.9 points earlier in the season. So I think he's definitely a super flex option at best. Another sit I have is Kyle Pitts. I know he had a good game
Yeah.
last week, but also I don't love him against Carolina. Their
No.
defense has allowed the 4th fewest points to tight ends this season. Pitts scored just 6.4 points against them earlier in the year. He's been really inconsistent all year long, and it's hard to expect him to have good back-to-back games. On Carolina's side of the ball, I'd probably just sit Bryce Young. I'd also sit Chuba Hubbard. But that's about all I have for this game.
Yeah, I think you got to play the Falcons' run game and their defense, and that may be it. There's not many points to go around this game, I believe. I think it's going to be a very low scoring one. I think Atlanta ultimately pulls out in the end, but not a fun fantasy matchup, especially to start the fantasy playoffs. Let's move on to Tampa Bay at Green Bay, the Battle of the Bays. Green Bay
Oof.
favored -3.5 points. I love Jordan Love in this matchup and Jaden Reed. I think both are starts. I actually have Jaden Reed as my start of the week at the wide receiver position. I think he's going to go off. Christian Watson is not looking like he's going to play. And Tampa Bay's secondary is banged up. While some of them are getting healthier, I believe they're going to get Devin White, the linebacker, back. Vita Vea is still in question. I think Jamel Dean is getting healthy. Their other corner or safety, I think, is not healthy, though. So this secondary is banged up. Jordan Love and Jaden Reed, I think, are going to take full advantage. I also like Romeo Dobbs in this matchup. I think he's a good flex play. The only starts I like really for Tampa Bay are Rashad White and Mike Evans, just because I don't think Chris Godwin's going to play. He's on the injury report. I don't think he's practiced all week, so that's something to monitor. And Mike Evans is going to get a lot of targets in this matchup. If the Packers are again without Jair Alexander, that just upgrades him even more. But I'm not loving the Tampa Bay wide receivers this week besides Mike Evans. I don't really love Baker Mayfield this week. I think the Packers defense is actually underrated and they're really good, and I think that they need to get right at home. They got exposed by Tommy DeVito on that last drive last week. Did not look good for them. Hopefully they get Jair Alexander back. But yeah, I love Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, especially in this matchup. I think you're starting both of them. As far as sits, AJ Dillon, I'm sitting him, but there's a possibility he will not even play. He has a broken thumb, I believe, and they're kind of figuring out whether he can play or not. I would not love starting him at all. So definitely sit AJ Dillon. Some sleepers I like are actually the Packers defense and the tight end Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft actually did really well last week, caught a couple long balls. If you're in a deep league or a tight end premium league and you're searching for a sleeper tight end, Tucker Kraft is a guy I like this week. I ultimately have the Packers winning in this matchup. And Tanner, what about you? Who do you like in this matchup? Who don't you like in this matchup?
Yeah, if he plays, I don't like Chris Godwin. He had
Yeah.
an okay week last week, but he scored single digits in 5 of his last 6 games. And the matchup this week is not good against the Packers. They've allowed only 8 touchdowns to wide receivers this season and the 8th fewest points to the position. I think he's a risky flex at best, but yeah, you don't need us to tell you to start Rashad White or Mike Evans. I do agree on sit Baker Mayfield. It's coming off a big game last week, scoring 20.1 points in a win over Atlanta. But that was Baker's first game with more than 13.4 points in the last 4 weeks. And a matchup against the Packers definitely, I think, makes him a fade. Their defense has been really tough at home, allowing an average of fewer than 15 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks this season. Definitely sit them. I agree with what you said about the Packers. Jordan Love, I think I have him at QB 10 this week. I'll get into that a little bit later. But and Jaden Reed too. Christian Watson, I don't think he's going to play. I believe he has the doubtful tag already. So
Mm-hmm.
by per NFL rules, that means he has a 25% chance to play. I believe is what the doubtful tag implies. So
Yeah. 2 hours ago, he got
he's,
that tag.
so I don't expect him to play. I wish he was, but no, that's about all I have for that game.
Yeah. I mean, doubtful is really bad, which is why I think you got to fire up Jaden Reed. And let's move on to the next game. It's going to be Bears at the Browns. Cleveland is favored in this matchup, -3. Joe Flacco's looked pretty good for them the last 2 weeks, throwing the ball. I think in Chicago, you got to start Fields, DJ Moore, and Colt Kmet. They've just been on a tear, those three. Kmet, I'm a little more not really excited about. I'd be fine with sitting him, but only if you have better options. The tight end position is slim. The only reason is Cole Kmet hasn't really scored a lot of touchdowns this year. So those touchdowns are going to DJ Moore, the running backs, or Justin Fields. maybe even Mooney. For Cleveland, I like starting Amari Cooper and David Njoku. Joe Flacco has been getting them the ball a lot, and he's been throwing it really well. The Chicago secondary isn't all that really. The Chicago run defense is better in my opinion. So yeah, I like starting these two guys. Some sits are Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert. We just haven't seen it from them. It's too risky, in my opinion, to go with either of them in the first week of the fantasy playoffs, second week, whatever week you're in the fantasy playoffs. It's tough. I would not be excited to start them. Some sleepers I do like are actually the Bears defense. They've looked very good over the past couple weeks, and I think they can cause some havoc for Joe Flacco for that run game. Who may be without Jerome Ford. I know he's hurt, but looking to get out there. Another sleeper I like is Deontay Foreman. He's really the only running back I'd be comfortable starting, but it's a very risky start. That's why I have him as a sleeper. I have the Browns defense and Jerome Ford as bust. The Browns defense is very, very injured, and they just lost their stud safety, Grant Delpit, for the year. He got placed on IR. So that is something to be cautious about. Jerome Ford also on the injury report. And like I said, the Bears defense has been good against the run. So I'd be hesitant to start Ford. I only think he gets you consistent 10 to 12 PPR points. I think he gets you there in the receiving game if he does go this week, but don't expect a huge game. I'd play some guys with some higher upside like Ty Chandler. I like Ty Chandler a little more over Ford just because Ty Chandler does not have to split the work like Ford will probably have to split with Kareem Hunt. I ultimately have the Bears upsetting in this matchup 2017. I think they get the win on the road. It's going to be tough to do, but I think they can do it. And as long as Justin Fields and DJ Moore are right, I think they can get that offense going and run away with this game. It's going to be a tight one, though. And we got to monitor the weather because the weather over there this week is not looking too great in the Midwest and on the East Coast. So something to monitor. I believe the weather can get hairy in Cleveland with the stadium being
Mhm,
right on the water.
mhm.
You get some weird weather conditions, so that's just something to watch out for. Tanner, what do you have for this matchup?
And
Chicago at Cleveland.
it's actually the same with Chicago too at
Yep.
Soldier Field. Um, originally I was just gonna kind of let you take the reign on that game, but I actually disagree with the Jerome Ford take. I
Okay.
mean, he continues to put up decent totals. He's scored at least
Mhm.
11.9 points in 6 straight games, so we kind of know where his floor is at, if you will. And yeah, not to just completely disagree with you, Brady, but I'd start him again this week. I think he faces a plus matchup against the Bears. The Bears defense has allowed the 10th most points to runners, including the most points to the position as receivers. So running backs
Okay.
are catching a lot of balls against the Bears. Ford, we know he's a versatile back. He should be in the mix as a runner and a pass catcher once again. I like his floor at 11.9. So
I
I
think
I don't know, but
well, he can get you there easily this week, I think, with the receiving game alone. Like you said, like they allow the most points receiving wise to running backs. But as far as rushing, I don't think he's doing all that. I think he's going to have to be a part of the pass game. So they're going to have to be in a trailing game script, which is what I'm expecting, but also monitor his injury because I know he's banged up. So
mhm,
I haven't seen an update on him, but oh, actually, he as of 3 hours ago, he's actually off the injury report. So you don't need to worry about his health. He's good to go, it
okay.
looks like. So, all right. Yeah, I have him as a bus, but I could definitely see him getting you there, receiving wise, not really rushing. Let's move on to the next game, Tanner. If you do you have anything else on this game besides Jerome Ford?
No, I think you covered everything. That was good.
Okay, yeah, let's move on to the Patriots division. The Jets at the Dolphins. Dolphins favored -9.5. The Jets go into Miami, and I think they can keep it close in this one. So I like starting the Jets defense in this matchup. If actually, I take that back. I don't love starting the Jets defense. I mean, they're like a dart throw, but I mean they've been boom and bust And I think they can, if there's no Tyreek Hill, I like him a lot more. I know he's on the injury report, and Mike McDaniel, he hasn't practiced all week. That's something to note. Mike McDaniel said if the trainers clear him and Tyreek feels good, he'll play. If not, he won't. So it's
Mhm.
really, I think, going to be a game time decision on this one. So you're going to have to wait for Tyreek Hill news. But that's why I would upgrade the Jets defense to a start if he definitely doesn't go. Garrett Wilson, I also love this week. And then Brees Hall, I think you're starting him. I know he's not been great all year, but I mean, he has the potential to boom, and I'd start him over some lower end running backs. And then Raheem Mostert for the Dolphins, I think, is a lock in start. Tyreek, if he plays, if Tyreek doesn't play, you got to start Jalen Waddle. And then Achan, his status is up in the air, I believe. I don't think we have an injury tag on him yet. Looking for it right now, but I don't see anything on him. So as we get more news, I'll update you guys on that. And then I think you got to start the Dolphins defense. They've looked pretty good. Zach Wilson, not that great at quarterback. I know he had a great week last week, but in my opinion, that was just a crazy, crazy game that kind of got away from the Texans, and they did not look great towards the end. I'm sitting Zach Wilson. I've got Tua as my bust of the week. So I've got some notes on Tua. So Tua, he actually finished QB 26 against the Jets in week 12, and they won this game 34-13. It wasn't like it was a close game. They blew them out. They leaned on the run game, and I would definitely sit him if you can. He has not finished highly on the QB chart as far as rankings go over the past couple weeks. And Garrett Wilson, I mentioned him earlier. This is why I like him. So in his last 5 Zach Wilson games, he's gotten 14 targets, 14 targets, 13 targets, 13 targets, and 12 targets. That's an insane target rate. He's also
Mhm.
had 108 yards, 93 yards, 80 yards, 100 yards, and 90 yards. He hasn't had under 80 yards in the last 5 Zach Wilson games. Zach Wilson's going to pepper him with targets. I believe Jalen Ramsey is going to be the one to guard him on the Miami Dolphins side. I think you have to start Garrett Wilson this week just because of target volume, and we know he's going to get looks a lot. And I believe the Jets are going to be trailing in this matchup, so they're going to be throwing a lot. So, yeah, I think that's why you got to start Garrett Wilson. Tanner, what do you have for this Jets at Dolphins game?
Honestly, you covered everything. I wanted to talk about Tua a lot, but I think you got it all for the most part.
Yeah, he hasn't been great. I mean, definitely if you've got better, like Jordan Love, definitely go Jordan Love over Tua, in my opinion. Like,
Mhm.
there has to be better options out there for you guys. I may even lean Sam Howell just because they're going to be throwing
Oh
an
yeah,
insane amount, and Sam Howell's like QB 7 on the season, I believe. Like, it's just
I'd
hard to
start.
get to Tua.
I'd start Goff. I'd start Sam Howell. I'd start Jordan Love, and I'd definitely start Matthew Stafford. All those guys
Yeah,
over Tua
yeah,
this
yeah.
week.
Stafford too. Stafford could be a guy that's still out there on your waivers somehow. If he
Oh,
didn't get
we're gonna
picked
talk
up.
about him pretty soon.
Oh, yeah, we are. We'll get to that game a little later. Let's go to the next game, Giants at Saints. This one's in New Orleans. We get the old Tommy DeVito show again. Hopefully he can upset the Saints. I'd love to see the Tommy DeVito story keep rolling on. It's just great to watch. The Giants going into New Orleans. I like starting Saquon Barkley in this one. And then as far as New Orleans, I like starting Alvin Kamara, but Chris Olave, I have him as a start. Just beware. He's going to be a game time decision. They did get Rashid Shaheed back this week, which is good for the Saints. But Chris Olave is questionable and will be a game time decision, according to the head coach, Allen. So Taysom Hill, not listed on the injury report either. I like him at the tight end position this week, especially with how slim that position is. And we could see him at the QB position. I mean, he lines up all over the field, he gets a lot of touchdowns. I think you gotta start Taysom Hill in the tight end position if you're hurting at tight end and need someone to fill in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. And as far as really some sleepers, I kind of like the Giants defense in this matchup as a sleeper. I think they can put some pressure on Derek Carr. We saw what they did to Jordan Love last week. They caused some issues. He didn't look great. they definitely put pressure on him. And I think the Giants defense can be a sleeper this week. Tanner, what do you have for this Giants at the Saints matchup?
Yeah, I mean Saquon definitely top running back this week. I do have some comments on DeVito, but I'm gonna save those for the Chiefs Patriots game. So I think you hit everything. Honestly, don't have too
Okay.
much to add for that.
Yeah, another sleeper wide receiver. I wouldn't be too keen on starting him, but I mean, if you're in like a super deep league and need someone, Wandale Robinson, if he's somehow out there, he caught a big pass at the end of the game that clinched that win for the Giants, and he's really good wide receiver. I love watching him. I think DeVito may lean on him a little bit in this one. But yeah, I think this one's going to be low scoring too. And the next game we're going into is going to be low scoring, in my opinion, too. It's the Texans at the Titans. Titans are favored in this one at home, -3. And everyone on Houston is hurt, it seems. Really the only guy that I think you could start maybe is Dalton Schultz, just because of the tight end position and how bad it is. But he hasn't been healthy. So I don't know how much playing time he's going to get if he actually does go. And his quarterback is not CJ Stroud. It's looking more like Davis Mills this week, which is not good in my opinion. As far as Tennessee, I think you got to start Derrick Henry and D Hop as
Hmm.
a flex. I like D Hop. And then the Titans defense I have as a sleeper.
Hmm.
Derrick Henry, I think this game's going to be the Derrick Henry show. I think they're going to lean on the run and get him and Tajay Spears going, but I could see Derrick Henry going for a top 5 fantasy performance at the running back position this week. They're at home. They need to get the win to stay in the playoff hunt, and they need to beat their division rivals to do so and knock them one game closer to them. Um, this is in Nashville. I think the Titans win this game. I really do. The Texans looked awful last week against the Jets. Maybe they get it back on track with their defense, but I'm a little nervous. Tanner, what about you? Do you have anything for this matchup, Texans at Titans?
Yeah, you hit it right. Right on the nail. I mean, so many people are banged up on Houston's side of the ball. I think Titans defense definitely a sleeper. These teams always play each other tough. That division in general, just anyways. I have Derrick Henry as RB9 on the week, so I definitely agree with that. And I don't have too much to add. Just there's so many injuries. I mean,
Yeah.
receivers, quarterback, Stroud's out. People, I mean, it's a shit show. Let's be honest. So Titans defense for sure.
Yeah, it's bad.
Coming off a big win, I agree with D Hop at the flex. So yeah, I think you got it. Honestly.
Let's go into your game now, Tanner. The Chiefs at the Patriots, baby. Chiefs are coming off a tough loss to the Bills. Kadarius Toney is going to line up in Kansas City at this point. They will leave him, not even take him on the plane. Mahomes, I know Tanner, you're going to disagree with this one, but I'm starting Mahomes. I'm starting Rashee Rice. I'm starting Travis Kelce, and I'm starting Chiefs defense. I'm also starting Ezekiel Elliott for the Patriots. I think he can do really well. Ramondre Stevenson does not look like he will be back. I believe they ruled him out. Yeah, they ruled him out an hour ago. He's out, so it is going to be the Ezekiel Elliott show, and he is going to be hungry, and I can't wait to see it. I'm starting him. I'm starting him and Bijan in one league, so that's going to be fun. A sleeper I love on the Patriots side of the ball is Demario Douglas. He's finally healthy out of concussion protocol, and I think he can do really well as a wide receiver 3 flex play for you. If you're in a deep league and need someone to fill in, that is a guy I definitely plug in. Another guy I like is Jerick McKinnon. We've seen his snap count increase over the past couple weeks, and I believe it may even increase a little more. No, Isaiah Pacheco, he just had surgery today, I
Mhm.
believe. And I think they're got to get Jerick McKinnon going as the playoffs approach. They got to get a win here. And then I have Bailey Zappi as a bust just because I think they won't throw the ball a ton and do great. Now, Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry may do well, but I still think they're going to lean on the run game and Zeke and have him carry along with their defense to try and keep this game close. Tanner, what do you have for this game? Because I know you got some surprising stuff for this matchup.
Boy, do I. Let's start it off with my start of the week at the running back position, and that is Zeke. He was a stardom for me last week. He had a really good game against Pittsburgh, and now he's got the Chiefs. They just gave up 141 scrimmage yards and over 25 fantasy points to James Cook. And if you look at the volume of touches and snaps that Zeke saw last week, he could end up being a top 12 running back this week. On the sit side of the ball, people don't come at me on Twitter about this, but listen, Joe Flacco has been better than Patrick Mahomes in the last 2 weeks. And in 2 of the last 3 weeks where Mahomes and Tommy DeVito have both played a game, DeVito has outscored Mahomes.
Oh, man.
Now, listen, maybe it's not Mahomes, maybe it's the offense or the receivers or their lack of receivers, maybe, if you will.
Can't even
But
line
this
up
is
on sides.
not a situation where Mahomes is not talented, because he is. They're just not producing. He gets my Patriots, who have been very tough on quarterbacks, especially lately, and in Gillette Stadium. Our defense has held Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Justin Herbert all under 13 points. So don't blindly start Patrick Mahomes. Be smart and stay out of my DMs. I mean, I know Mahomes is going to be top 10 QB, but if you have some other options, like just
Jordan
be aware.
Love, Matthew Stafford. I'd go Matthew Stafford.
While we're on it, I would go Matthew Stafford and Brock Purdy and Lamar and Josh Allen and Dak and Jalen Hurts are the only guys I'd start over Mahomes. But to put him right in the same tier, I'd put him in the same tier as Sam Howell, Jared Goff, Jordan Love for sure.
Yeah.
But I think I'd probably put Mahomes at the top of that tier just because, like I said, it's not a talent issue.
Yeah.
Anyways, on a sit side of the ball for the Patriots, though, I think Hunter Henry would not be chasing the points in that game.
Yeah.
It was his birthday last week, and congratulations, Hunter. You had 2 touchdowns. However, I just don't see that happening again. He scored. Gosh. All right. Hunter Henry, he scored not 1 but 2 touchdowns on his birthday. That was a nice gift, but he's not going to get another one this week against the Chiefs, whose defense has not allowed a tight end to score more than 11.7 points in a game this year, and just 3 have scored double digits. That means the ceiling is very low for tight ends, and I think Hunter Henry comes back to earth, and I would sit him. For a bust, I do have a bust for this game, and it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You just mentioned Pacheco's not going to play. Edwards-Helaire received more work last week in the absence of Pacheco, but he still failed to make much of a fantasy impact. That's the likely scenario this week too, as they'll face my Patriots defense that's been tough on runners. In fact, no defense in the league has allowed fewer points to the position over the last 4 weeks of the season. I think you got to look out for Edwards-Helaire to be a bust this weekend.
Yeah.
And that's all I have on that game.
Yeah, so last week, Edwards-Helaire had a 48% snap count. Jerick McKinnon, coming off 2 missed games, had a 45% snap count. That's why I have McKinnon as a sleeper. I think he could up his snap count because maybe they limited him a little bit last week because he was coming off a 2-game injury absence. So maybe they finally get him going this week. They've got to get something going this week. This offense looks stagnant, and they don't look great, like you're saying, Tanner. Like, I think the Patriots do keep this game close, but I think the Chiefs ultimately win in the end. And let's move on to the next one. It's going to be San Francisco at Arizona. This game was a little closer earlier in the year when the Cardinals traveled to San Francisco, but they don't have Josh Dobbs. They actually have Kyler Murray in this matchup. I think that they could surprise some people coming off the bye week. They could cover the spread plus 12. They are at home, but I mean, the Niners are firing on all cylinders, so I expect them to win this game, but don't expect the Cardinals to fold. I think they come out of this bye kind of wanting to prove something, but I don't expect them to win this game. I actually don't like a lot of Cardinals. The only Cardinal I'm really keen on starting is Trey McBride at the tight end position because I think they're going to be throwing a lot. If you don't have better options out there, this position is very slim. I would start Trey McBride. As far as San Francisco, I think you know who to start. It's going to be everyone, really. Purdy, McCaffrey, Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, Niners defense. You're firing them all up to have big games. You got to sit Kyler Murray, in my opinion, in this game. I think he is going to bust, and definitely do not play the Cardinals defense either. Another bust I have is actually James Conner. James Conner,
Mhm.
he is on my bust of the week list. The Niners have not allowed more than 65 yards rushing since week 8 to opposing teams running the football. Since the bye week, they've only given up one rushing touchdown. In week 13, Connor did have 22.5 fantasy points. However, he's only finished as a top 12 running back 3 times this year. In 6 games, he's finished RB 27 or worse. Like I said, they're coming off a bye. Maybe they got Michael Carter a little more work during the bye week, and maybe he's a little more comfortable with this offense coming out of the bye, and maybe he gets a little higher snap count and cuts into Connor's touches. I would definitely avoid starting James Conner if possible. I think he's going to bust this week, and you do not want a bust in the first round of the fantasy playoffs. Tanner, what do you have for this Niners at Cardinals game?
Yeah, my start of the week at the quarterback position is Brock Purdy. He's been very good over the last few weeks. He's really only had one bad game over the last month, which was against Seattle. He gets Arizona, who gives up right around 18 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Brock Purdy is inside my top 8 this week. Um, Arizona, sit Kyler Murray.
Yep.
He's been pretty good since his return from the knee injury, but he gets a bad matchup this week against the Niners, who have allowed only Jalen Hurts to score more than 15.3 points against them since week 10. Kyler is much more of a high end number 2 QB in a super flex league.
Mhm.
And like you said on James Conner, listen, I admit it. The last time I had him as a sit, he went off against Pittsburgh. He had a huge game with over 20 points, but now he gets the Niners. And the last time he played them in week 4, he had only 6.6 points, and he had failed to score double digits since week 3 before that game against Pittsburgh. I think James Conner is a huge risk.
Yeah.
And yeah, fire up everybody on Niners side of the ball. I think I've got Niners as number 1 ranked defense this week. Um, so yeah, I think we hit everything on that.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next matchup. Staying in this division for one team, the Los Angeles Rams. The Commanders are visiting the Rams in LA, and the Rams are favored by -6.5. I think this game has shootout potential, but I think the Rams definitely win this game. I think you're starting a lot of players in this matchup. It's going to be fantasy friendly, in my opinion. Matthew Stafford, definitely highly ranking him this week. I think he has top 10 upside, top 5 upside, top 10, top 12. Um, I think you got to start him. Sam Howell, another quarterback I do like. I think you may, if you have a deeper league or like a wide receiver three wide receiver league, Curtis Samuel is someone I like as a flex play. And then Logan Thomas is a sleeper tight end I do like this week because the Rams defense has not been great against the tight end. We saw what Isaiah Likely did to them last week. I think Logan Thomas could get going. Sam Howell's got to find some targets, and I think Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, maybe even Terry McLaurin shows up. No Brian Robinson to note in this matchup for the Commanders. Antonio Gibson is a sleeper for me this week. I think he's going to get a lot of touches. Another sleeper in like super, super deep leagues is their other running back, Chris Rodriguez Jr. He could get some work, but I mean, you have to be desperate to play a guy like him this week. And as far as some other starts for the Rams, these are some guys, I mean, you should already have locked in. Kyron Williams, Puka Nakua, and Cooper Kupp. I think you could even be comfortable with the Rams defense, but I'd be a little cautious because this Washington offense has the potential to make them pay in the pass game. I don't think they're going to get much going on the ground. I think the Rams win this one easily. Another sleeper I do like for the Rams is Demarcus Robinson, the wide receiver. We've seen him get going over the past couple weeks, so maybe he finds something this week. Maybe he finds the end zone. Tanner, who do you like in this matchup for the Rams and Commanders?
There's actually a lot to like in this game from a
Okay.
fantasy perspective. Um, you mentioned my guy, Scary Terry, and that's where I'm going to start. Do you remember last week when he said, "Well, I was out there getting some good cardio"?
Yep.
That
Yeah, I do.
translates in wide receiver talk to throw me the fucking football. And
Yeah.
I think this could be a high scoring game. The Rams have allowed the seventh most points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And Terry should get the damn ball this week for
He
sure.
needs to. He needs to.
Um, yeah, you hit it right. Matthew Stafford, 3 straight games over 20 fantasy points, 2 times against really good defenses. Now he gets the Commanders, who are just awful against quarterbacks. They've allowed 9 touchdown passes and 24.7 points per game to the position since week 11. Stafford is no doubt a top 10 option. Guy I
Mhm.
really love this week, and I have inside my top 10, actually, both wide receivers on the Rams side of the ball, and that's Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp. Puka had 14 points in last week's loss to the Ravens, but he still scored single digits in 3 of his last 6 games. Regardless, though, this week's matchup versus the Commanders makes him a virtual must start. Their defense has given up the second most points to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, including 6 touchdowns allowed.
Yeah, Demarcus Robinson, another reason I like him. Last week, 86% snap rate behind only Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua at the wide receiver position. I think they're going to fire him up. I think, yeah, like you said, passing game is going to go crazy for both teams. I think this is going to be a shootout, honestly. I'd be hesitant. I know people like the Rams defense. They do have potential to
Yeah,
maybe make them pay, but I'd be hesitant. I would definitely prefer playing
yeah.
other teams in lower over under games. This over under is set at 49 points. So Vegas knows that this game can be a shootout. And yeah, I definitely look at some bad weather matchups over on the East Coast, like the Falcons, if they're out there. I know they're out there in a lot of leagues. So, I-
And again, you don't need us. I mean, do I really need to sit here and explain and I will at the end of the episode, but do I really need to tell y'all Kyron Williams is RB3 on the week this week? Like, no, you already know that. So,
yeah, you're
but there's
locking him in. You're locking him in as a starting
yeah,
running back at this point. There's no question about that. I don't think we have much else on this game. So let's move on to Dallas at Buffalo. Potential game of the week. Buffalo is favored by 2 at home, and there's some good weather in Buffalo. There's not a lot of good weather on the East Coast or the Midwest, but in Buffalo, it is looking, last I checked, it was supposed to be 40 degrees with a brisk 10 to 15 mile an hour wind and no rain. So I like a lot of players in this matchup. You're starting everyone on the Cowboys that you normally would start: Dak, Pollard, CD, Ferguson. As far as Buffalo goes, I think you got to start Josh Allen, no doubt about it. James Cook, I like this week. And then Diggs, fire him up again. I think he's going to try and prove something this week. And along with Dalton Kincaid, who is not on the injury report, I would strongly suggest sitting Brandon Cooks in this matchup. He hasn't performed well away from home. He had a great run at home, but at home, he also doesn't see a lot of targets. That's something to watch out for. It's really the Ferguson and CD show in Dallas. And then Brandon Cooks is only averaging 2.5 receptions, less than 22 receiving yards per game, and he's only scored 1 touchdown in 6 games on the road. At home, he averages nearly 36 yards more, and he scored a touchdown in 4 of 7 games at home. So he's definitely had a struggle on the road. So I would strongly suggest sitting Brandon Cooks this week. I know it may be tough to do, but I do like Jaden Reed over him pretty easily this week. And I think you would probably agree with that, Tanner.
mm,
Some sleepers, Rico Dowell. Maybe the Cowboys start getting the run game going. I know that Buffalo's a little banged up on the defensive line with AJ Epinesa being out, and their safety Micah Hyde is also out. I have Gabe Davis as a boom bust wide receiver 3 flex play. If you need to start him, you're just hoping that he booms, but I have him as a bust this week. I think he may struggle, and I think Dalton Kincaid and Stephon Diggs and James Cook kind of lead the way for this Buffalo Bills offense. Tanner, what do you have for this matchup on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, so I was wondering, Brady, where do you rank Tony Pollard this week?
Ooh, so Tony Pollard, I'd probably have him like fringe RB1, RB2 range, probably like RB 12, 13-ish. I wouldn't be too keen on him. I mean, the Bills, okay, actually wait, never mind. The Bills are not great against the run. So I'd probably have him as a top 10 running back,
Okay,
borderline
cool.
though. Borderline.
Yes, I
Borderline top
literally
10.
have him at number 10. And as you started to say like 12 or 13, I was going to say, like, cool, am I crazy for putting him at 10? But no,
No, you're not.
borderline 10. Of course, we're right on the same page. Love that.
Yeah, I had to
No,
think
you,
about
you
it
hit
for a
it.
second.
Yeah, you got it though. Yeah, you guys know who to start at this point. Dak, Pollard, CD, Ferguson, Josh Allen. I do like James Cook. I got
Yeah,
James
yeah.
Cook. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I
But
really
yeah, I
like
think you
James
got
Cook
everything.
this week. He's getting a lot of
Mhm.
volume since Joe Brady took over, which is very nice to see. And so do you have anything else on Buffalo? Who do you think's going to win this game?
Mm, call me crazy, bro. I'm hammering Dallas Cowboys money line.
Holy cow. I
I'm
I really
hammering
think
it.
I really think that the Bills defense is a little too banged up for this Cowboys offense. Like this Cowboys offense has been very efficient since the bye, and they've been on a tear. And Dak is on his MVP run. Going into Buffalo is not an easy task, but I think that the Cowboys do win this game. I actually have them winning 30-27 in this matchup. Um, but yeah, I think it should be a high scoring matchup, which should turn out to be a fun game on Sunday afternoon. And the Sunday night game is actually Baltimore going into Jacksonville. It looks like we may see a little bad weather, maybe some rain, 15, 20-mile-an-hour winds. Nothing too crazy, but something to monitor for sure. Lamar Jackson is definitely starting in your lineup. Zay Flowers, I like as a flex play. Isaiah Likely, I like as a borderline tight end one. I think he should be inserted in your lineup. He saw
Yes.
a lot of targets last week, and I think
Mhm,
he's going to do well again this week. No Mark Andrews, so fire him up. The Ravens defense
mhm,
could do well in this matchup. They could cause some pressure on Trevor Lawrence. If you have better options out there for defense, maybe start someone else over him, but their defense 2 on the year, so it's hard to sit them. Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne are the 2 starts I have on the Jacksonville side of the ball. Evan Ingram has been getting targeted heavily with Christian Kirk out, and I like him a lot.
mhm,
Travis Etienne, I don't love this matchup for him. The Ravens have been really good against the run, and he hasn't looked all that good as of late, but he's been a top running back all year. So I think you have to lock him in hopes that he gets back on track at home this week. I would strongly suggest sitting Trevor Lawrence if you can. I'm not too high on him. This Baltimore Ravens defense is very good, but Matthew Stafford did do well against them last week. So maybe we see another shootout, a high scoring game in Sunday Night Football, which would be a lot of fun to see. Some sleepers I do like on the Baltimore side is Odell Beckham and Keaton Mitchell. Both of those guys I think can do well. They're like borderline flex plays for me. And then some sleepers on the Jacksonville side. This is some deeper league stuff. Parker Washington got into the end zone last week. I think you can save some money in daily fantasy putting him in your lineups, but don't expect a touchdown every week from him, although he has scored each of the past 2 weeks. Zay Jones is also another guy I think people are sleeping on. I would strongly suggest sitting Calvin Ridley in this matchup. Um, he's just too boomer bust for me. If you have a better option, definitely go with that better option. If you don't, then I guess you're stuck with going with Calvin Ridley, but it's tough to start him every week, not knowing how he'll produce week in and week out, especially after his strong start in week one and occasionally whenever they had Christian Kirk on the field and Zay Jones. I think that doesn't help him not having both of them on the field with him. Tanner, who do you like? Who do you hate in this matchup on Sunday night?
I really like Zay Flowers. He's been great the last couple of weeks with 2 straight games of 20 plus points. Love the matchup this week against the Jags, who have allowed the fourth most points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, including 5 touchdowns. So start Zay Flowers, and I like OBJ as well. You mentioned Isaiah Likely. We mentioned him last week, and we'll mention him again this week. He scored a season high 19.3 points in a win over the Rams. I'd roll with him again this week as he'll face a Jaguars defense that has allowed 27.1 PPR points to David Njoku last week.
Oh
Gave him
yeah.
his first ever career multi-touchdown game. Of course, I listed him as a sit, and he goes and does that. Their defense has now allowed 20 plus points to enemy tight ends twice in the last 5 weeks. We know Isaiah Likely's been a part of this offense, so he's in a good spot to produce.
Yep.
Um, is Ridley not going to be your highest rated Jags wide receiver though?
No, he will be, but I mean, I'm not confident in starting him. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then my only other thing is, and you don't need us to tell you this, but I do have Evan Ingram at tight end 5 this week, so fire him up as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think you gotta fire him up. I think with a Christian Kirk out, it's really helped him kind of explode. That's all for the Sunday matchups. So let's move on to Monday Night Football, the flexed game into Monday night. We've got the Eagles going into Seattle. This could be a little upset alert. Maybe the Eagles get back on track, maybe not. Geno Smith is actually leaning towards possibly playing on Monday night. That's something to monitor over the next couple of days. If you don't have anyone better at the quarterback position, maybe risk it, but I'd rather start a different quarterback if you can, just because of the unknown and it being a Monday night game. I do like DK Metcalf a lot in this matchup. The Philly secondary is absolutely horrendous. They've allowed a ton of points over the last 2 or 3 games, and they looked awful against the Cowboys last week. They lost one of their safeties. I don't know if he's going to be out for Monday night. Tyler Lockett is borderline flex worthy, I want to say. Definitely gets upgraded if Geno is the quarterback and not Drew Lock. I think you're starting Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, who I like to bounce back this week, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert. Fire up the Eagles. I also like Jackson Smith and Jigba as a sleeper. Something to note about Jackson Smith and Jigba: he has gotten the most targets of Seattle wide receivers over the past 2 weeks. He's got 18 total targets, 7 targets, and 11 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Led the team in that category. So I think he could get a lot of volume against this Philly secondary, who's not great. And if you have to go with a deeper option in a deep league at a flex spot, I like Jackson Smith and Jigba this week. This Philly, as far as Philly goes, I like DeAndre Swift getting back on track because Seahawks are allowing a ton of rushing yards to running backs, 94.4 rushing yards per game and 38 receiving yards per game to running backs. Over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed 5 touchdowns to running backs, and I think he gets back on track here in Seattle. They've got to get him going, got to get this run game going, something to kind of get this offense kick-started. And they didn't get him going last week, and the Cowboys ran away with that one. So I think they have to get the run game established. Tanner, what do you like about this game as far as Seattle and Philly?
Yeah, you mentioned Lockett. He had his best game in a month last week, scoring 14.9 points in a loss to the Niners. I'd give him another start this week as he faces a plus matchup against the Eagles. Their defense has just been too vulnerable to wideouts all season. They've allowed 23 touchdowns and a league high 47.7 fantasy points per game to the position. As a result, Lockett is a nice flex. On Eagles, I think you got to start Dallas Goedert. Last week, he only had 4 targets. The numbers weren't great. He failed to score double digits in 4 of his last 5 games. So he's not really a reliable option from a fantasy perspective. But he's got Seattle this week, who have allowed 9 or more points to tight ends 5 times in the last 7 weeks. So if I can get 9, 10, 11 points from Goddard, considering how thin the position is, I think anything more than that is going to be great. So we know what Goddard can do, what his floor could be this week. If they're going to give him 9, I mean, considering the position, I think that's good. My sit of the week at the running back position, Brady, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Swift? Is it going to be
Better not
Chardonnay?
be
Ken Walker?
Swift.
It's Ken Walker this week.
Yeah.
Here's the
Yeah, that's a good
problem.
one.
Last week, he came back from the injury, only 9.4 points, and he basically was splitting snaps and touches with Zach Charbonnet. Now he gets the Eagles, who have allowed 4 touchdowns and the second fewest fantasy points to running backs. So definitely beware of Ken Walker this week.
Yeah.
I feel like I forgot somebody. I'm definitely disappointed about that, but I think we got everything. I think you probably mentioned it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Eagles do get back on track, although I have them on upset alert, but I think they have to get back on track this week. If they don't,
Mm,
that really hurts their chances at getting that 1 seed and winning the NFC East. It just helps the Cowboys out even more, which I would love to happen, but I think they get back on track. I think, they can't lose 3 straight. And I also saw that they were 0 of 7 the last 7 meetings against the Seahawks. Going into Seattle isn't an easy place, but I think they got to get back on track.
I did forget one player, and you did talk about him. It's Swift. I know he's been a
Yeah,
real dud in recent weeks, scoring a combined
has not been
16.3
good.
points in his
Mhm.
last 3 games.
Really
Still,
bad.
though, it'll be tough to ignore this week's matchup against the Seahawks. Their defense has been awful against runners, allowing 16 total touchdowns and the 5th most points to the position this season. He's a risk, I get that, but Swift
Gotta
does
fire
have
him up.
flex potential. He does have
Yeah,
flex
I
potential.
I I like him as an RB2 flex play this week for sure. That's it for all the
Mhm.
games, Tanner. Let's go into a couple mailbag questions. I'm gonna shout them out. Give your thoughts, and then I'll give my thoughts, and then we can go into our top start sits and busts, kind of recapping what we've already said for the listeners. So first mailbag question: choose one defense. This is at Hunt Van Dale on Twitter. Texans, Bengals, or Falcons? Choose one.
Mm, Falcons. And I didn't even mention why I would sit Adam Thielen earlier in the
Oh,
episode. So I guess I
I
can go ahead and get
yeah,
into that now.
yeah,
But I'd start the Falcons this week.
I would
Thiele's
too.
numbers, who I mentioned sit Chuba Hubbard earlier. I mentioned sit Bryce Young. Bench Thielen too. Thielen's numbers have nosedived in the last few weeks as he's failed to score more than 12.4 points in 5 of his last 6 games. He had
Yeah.
scored 15 plus points in his 6 previous games, including 4 games with more than 20 points. So his totals have really gone south. And the Falcons have been tough on wideouts and held Thielen to a mere 3.2 fantasy points in week 1. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd go with the Falcons on that one. What about you, Brady?
Yeah, I love the Falcons in that one. The weather isn't expected to be great, I believe. I had it pulled up. Yeah, 94% chance of rain, 51 degrees, 16-mile-an-hour winds. The over unders 33.5. I think you got to go with the Falcons defense. They're definitely the better one out of those 3. And if they're still out there, grab them. We got another one
Mm,
coming in. This is actually a 3-parter.
okay.
Flowers, Zay Flowers or Jaden Reed. Smooth Select 100 says, yeah, Zay Flowers or Jaden Reed. That's the first one. I'll get into the other 2 after we answer this one. For me, I'm going to go with Jaden Reed in this one. I think he has top 24 potential this week, and he's going to be the top target for Jordan Love against a very, very suspect Bucks secondary. What about you, Tanner?
So
Is
how
it
close do you have the two? I have the two super close,
They're
but
they're neck and neck. They are neck
I
and neck.
do. Yes, these are the fantasy playoffs decisions we have to make. I'm actually gonna flip the other way, I think, and go with Flowers just for some of the things that I mentioned. I mean, the last 2 weeks he scored a combined 43.2 points. I think that he'll remain productive against the Jags. Their
Yeah.
defense has allowed the 4th most points to wideouts over the last 4 weeks. And during that time, they've given up 5 touchdown catches to receivers, too. I think Zay Flowers is a solid number 2 fantasy wideout this week. And yes, I do have them both neck and neck, but I think I'd lean Flowers. He's just
Yeah,
too
I
hot
think
right
this is kind of a one where you can't really go wrong. I think both should do well.
now. Mhm.
Now for the next one, Trey McBride or Cole Kmet. He says leaning McBride, but tough matchup for Arizona.
All right. I'll start off on this one. I'm gonna go McBride for sure.
Okay.
I think I have him at tight end 7, but it's not as much about McBride. It's actually more about Komet.
Yeah.
Komet is a tough player to sit, so consider this a warning to temper expectations. Now, while the Browns did give up 32.5 points to Evan Ingram last week, their
Hmm.
defense has actually been one of the toughest in the league against tight ends, and especially at home.
Hmm.
In fact, their defense has held George Kittle, Pat Freiermuth, and Trey McBride under 6 points in games played in Cleveland. So, considering that, I'd go McBride. What about you, Brady?
Yeah, I'm leaning McBride slightly. I know he has a bad matchup, but I think his target volume is going to be a lot higher than Cole Kmet's. We saw it the week prior to their bye. Kyler was peppering him with targets, and I think that continues. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Trey McBride over Cole Kmet. And for his last question, he says James Conner or Najee Harris, leaning towards Najee for the same reason. Arizona has a tough matchup against the 49ers. This is a PPR league as well. But for me, I'm going Najee Harris. I think that they're going to
Mhm,
feed him the rock, and I have James Conner as a bust, so I can't really tell
mhm.
someone to sit someone I have as a bust. Um, what about you, Tanner?
Yeah, so this week, and I was going to talk about it here in a couple minutes, but I did do daily fantasy bargains and daily fantasy fades. Going back to his tight end question, I actually have both of those tight ends as fades, but I'd still lean McBride. In regards to this question, I have James Conner as a DFS fade, and I have the latter as a start, as we already mentioned earlier in the episode. So I
Yep,
think you
I
go
think
Najee. I think Jalen Warren's going to be productive too, and
you
yeah,
just
I
gotta
think
hope.
Najee on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Steelers should lean on the run game if they want to win that one. So we've got another question: start to
Actually,
sit
Brady,
free.
if you don't mind, sorry, Connor. I mean, his last
Oh yeah,
game was a big one against the Steelers,
it
like
was.
we said. But just as again, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, I mean, he had failed to put up more than 8.3 points in his previous 5 games. The matchup against the Niners, I think, makes him a gamble. But going off of how he performed against them the last time, the veteran, he was held to just 6.6 points. I think at best, Connor's a shaky flex option. Sorry.
Yeah. So we've got four more questions, and I think we
Mhm.
rapid fire because we're getting a little short on time here.
Okay.
Um, so this next question, full PPR league, start a wide receiver and a flex. There's five players to choose from. DJ Moore, Rasheed Rice, Jaden Reed, Devon Achan, and Keaton Mitchell. Start two.
Here, I'll let you answer that one first because I have to write down those names again.
Yeah, so DJ Moore, Rasheed Rice, Jaden Reed,
More.
Achan. So yeah, DJ Moore should be a lock. I think I'm gonna go with Jaden Reed over Rasheed Rice, Achan, and Mitchell. Achan too much up in the air, in my opinion, with his injury. We know Raheem Mostert's gonna get the targets and volume ahead of Achan. Now he has the potential to break off some big runs. Same with Keaton Mitchell, but in my opinion, Achan and Keaton Mitchell are two boom bust. I think Jaden Reed and DJ Moore are the two that you go with in that one.
Yeah, DJ Moore for sure. It was Rasheed Rice, Achan, Mitchell, and who else was the last one?
Jaden Reed of the Packers.
Uh, So definitely DJ Moore, no doubt about it. I think
No,
that's a
yeah,
no-brainer.
gotta lock him in.
He's without a doubt top 20, maybe fringe top 15 play this week.
Tough matchup, but
Um,
yeah, he should be up there. He's gonna get peppered.
But I think if Achan plays, I think you got to play him as the second option. So I'd go with those
Okay.
two.
Okay. So that was at Gilfy141. Now we've got at Philip Bubs, Philip Norman. He's got two questions. This one's an
Mhm.
interesting one. Matthew Stafford or Dak Prescott? He loves Stafford. He has Puka and Kyron, so I guess he's looking to combo them. Um, what do you think, Tanner? I think he goes Dak. I mean,
I did too.
without Micah Hyde, Dak's been on a tear. I think you got to start Dak, even though Stafford
Mhm.
has a great matchup this week.
Yeah, I've got Dak at QB2 and Stafford at QB6. So I'd go Dak on that one.
Yep, same person. This is a half PPR league. It matters more for this question. Sit one. So he's starting, wants to start two. David Montgomery, Jamar Chase, Michael Pittman. Half PPR. In my opinion, I'm going David Montgomery. And oh man, this is tough. Jamar Chase or Michael Pittman. I think I may go Jamar, but just slightly over Michael Pittman. Actually,
Yeah.
let me rethink. So this is
No, no,
half
no.
PPR. This
No, no,
is
no.
half
You hit it
PPR.
right on the dot. Yeah. If this were, you know, if it, so I've, this is our first half PPR mailbag question. So if I were to answer this question based on a no PPR standpoint, I think David Montgomery easily number one. And then I do agree with you, Jamar Chase. Uh, uh,
It's
no,
tough. It's way too tough.
no, no. I think it's Montgomery and I think it's Pittman. I think that would be whether you're in full point PPR or half point PPR. Pittman
Yeah.
for sure. I
I
mean,
I think
and
Pittman gets a lot more targets in this matchup against the Steelers. I think they try and throw him the ball a lot more. Jamar Chase is too boomer bust for me. I think Pittman's been way more consistent, honestly.
so we're gonna agree Pittman and Montgomery.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we agree. I mean, Pittman has had 80 plus yards receiving each of the past 4 weeks, and he's had eight or more catches. So that's a solid 16-point floor in full PPR and 12-point floor in half PPR. I think you got to go with the guy who gives you a solid floor. And yeah, we were both agreeing Pittman and Montgomery. Last mailbag question: start one, and this is going to be Mike Evans, Jaden Reed, and Brandon Ayuk, full PPR.
Uh, Mike Evans, Jaden Reed, and who?
Brandon Ayuk.
Well, I
I
don't know.
think
This seems pretty off the dome to me, but what do you think? I mean, Mike Evans
I
without a
think
shadow
Mike
of a
Evans
doubt.
without Chris Godwin. I mean, no Chris Godwin, he should see the full volume. I do love Jaden Reed this week, but I think you got to go with a guy like Evans who is looking to bounce back after the bad performance last week. If they don't have Jair in the secondary for the Packers, this could be a very good game for Mike Evans. Um, I think I'm leaning towards Evans, yeah. Especially with no Godwin. We know where the targets are going to go. It's going to be him and Rashad White. So I expect them to be trailing in this matchup. So yeah, I think you go Mike Evans. That's it for all the mailbag questions.
Wait, but Mike Evans, and then also you want to go with Ayuk to answer the second part of the
Well,
question. I
no,
think
it's
it's
just
Evans and
it's just start
oh, just
one.
pick one.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike Evans then. Mike Evans.
Yeah, I think they're going to be passing a lot more on that. I think San Francisco should have a comfortable lead. So, yeah, so Mike Evans it is. And let's go into our top start sits and busts really quick, kind of recapping what we've already said and gone into detail about. Um,
Mm,
so Tanner, what do you have for your top do you have top
starts.
starts? Yeah.
Yeah. So at quarterback, I've got Brock Purdy, I mentioned earlier. Running back, I've got Zeke. Wide receiver, I got Puka Nakua. And tight end, I got Sam Laporta. Brady, what about you?
I've got Jordan Love at the quarterback position, DeAndre Swift at the running back position, Cortland Sutton at the wide receiver position, Evan Ingram at the tight end, and then at the flex, I've got Garrett Wilson. And defense, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I think they make it troublesome for Bailey Zappi. Hopefully, they don't have Zeke running wild on them. But yeah, so now let's move
What
on to
about
our
for your what
what?
about for your sits of the week? Sorry if I
Yeah.
interrupted you.
No, you're good. Yeah, let's move on to the sits. I've got see here. QB Tua Tagovailoa. Definitely recommend sitting him if you can this week. Like I said, QB 26 last time he faced the Jets defense. Running back James Conner, we went over that earlier.
Mhm.
Wide receiver Drake London. I don't think I went over his stats versus home and the road. This also kind of ties into Ritter being better at home than the road. And
Mhm.
at home, he's averaging nearly 89 receiving yards per game, whereas on the road, he's averaging 35 receiving yards per game. He only has one touchdown on the road, one touchdown at home. So he's really not scoring touchdowns a lot anyways this year. But I don't expect him to do well on the road. This weather doesn't look great. The Carolina defense is definitely better against the pass. So sit Drake London. Tight end, I actually have Cole Kmet in parentheses if you can. If you can't sit him, definitely go with him. I don't mind it. He's the second option in this offense behind DJ Moore. But I would recommend sitting him. And then another guy I was pretty keen on sitting, Brandon Cooks. And defense-wise, Texans defense, I actually told someone to start the Raiders defense last night over the Texans, and it paid dividends for them in that matchup. 2 touchdowns for the Raiders defense last night, handful of sacks and forced fumbles. It was a great outing from that defense last night. So Tanner, what about you for your sits and busts?
All right. Quarterback got Kyler Murray, running back Kenneth Walker, wide receiver Chris Godwin, and tight end Hunter Henry. Tried to cover all of my top starts and sits whenever we went through all of the games.
Yeah.
Now I've also got some daily fantasy bargains that I wanted to mention, which I guess you could put underneath the top sleepers category.
Yeah.
And that's going to be Jordan Love at 6,200,
Love him this
Stafford
week.
at 6,000, and Flacco at 5,500. Budget
I
QB
do like.
streamer.
Mm-hmm.
James Cook, I really like at 6,500, coming off 141 scrimmage yards the game before. Zeke at 5,800, and Antonio Gibson at 5,200. They announced today Brian Robinson Jr. is not going to play.
Yeah.
At the wide receiver position, Rashee Rice at 6,100. Scary Terry, throw him the damn ball at 5,600.
Throw him the damn ball, bro.
And Jaden Reed at 4,900.
Love Jaden Reed.
Tight end position, these are under the circumstances that you've already spent most of your budget on top guys. You just kind of want to throw a dart at the tight end position. I like Cade Otton at 3,200. Tucker Kraft against the Buccaneers at 3,000. And Okonkwo at 2,900.
Yeah, if you want to get
I've also got a list of
get a little sneaky with the double tight end lineup, save some money maybe.
I've also got some daily fantasy fades. Brady, did you have anything you wanted to say about top sleepers at each position?
Yeah, I've got some sleepers. So Sam Howell at the quarterback position. I think that game's going to be a shootout in LA, and they're going to be throwing the ball the whole game. And I also have Ty Chandler at the running back position, although he's more of a start in my opinion. If you at the running back 2 flex, Jaden Reed, I have him as a start really. I had him as a sleeper, but with Christian Watson likely being out, I'm upgrading him to a start. And then tight end, I've got Logan Thomas, flex or wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Like I said, he's gotten heavily targeted over the last 2 weeks, leading the Seattle team in targets. And then defense, Falcons defense. I know they're out there in a lot of leagues. I think we got to go pick them up and start them, especially with how bad the Panthers offense has been. So, yeah, those are some guys I do like this week as sleepers.
All right, now moving over to the daily fantasy fades. Just gonna rapid fire through this really quickly. Tua 7,900, Mahomes 7,800, Kyler 6,400. Fade those guys, too expensive. Aaron Jones 6,500, James Conner 5,700, Devin Singletary 5,400. Going over to wide receiver, Jalen Waddle at 7,400. DJ Moore at 6,900. And Thielen at 6,300. Trey McBride, I'd fade. I think he's too. These guys, they're good players, just too expensive. Trey McBride, 5,200. Cole Kmet, 4,500. Kyle Pitts, 4,000. Just wouldn't play any of those guys.
Yeah.
What about you, Brady? Whether it's daily fantasy or not.
So actually, no, daily fantasy this week, I actually may try and go a lot of Jaden Reed and maybe some people from the Commanders, like Curtis Samuel could be a sneaky option. I haven't looked at ownership percentages, but yeah, as far as I like Antonio Gibson in that matchup, since they're going to be trailing, I think they're going to be throwing him the ball a lot, and he could be an underrated pass catcher in that matchup. And I don't know what Sam Howell's priced. I haven't even really looked at pricing yet, but I do like Sam Howell, QB7 on the year. And depending on his price, I may go his way. And maybe Terry McLaurin. Maybe I'll get there. I may get there with Terry McLaurin. I mean, he's going to want to have a big game. And I think Sam Howell and him maybe talked about it on the bye week, and maybe they come out and get something going because he's their best wide receiver and he can't be running cardio out there anymore. But I'll honestly probably update you guys on some DFS lineups this weekend. I'm going to be setting a few, so I'll update you on what I'm seeing. And yeah, I don't really have anything else though for the listeners. What about you, Tanner?
Yes, I do want to mention my top 10 at each position if I can really quickly.
Yeah, let's do
no
that.
no notes, just names. Quarterback, we're gonna go at the 1, Jalen Hurts, 2, Dak Prescott, 3, Josh Allen, 4, Lamar Jackson, 5, Brock Purdy, 6, Matthew Stafford, 7, Mahomes, 8, Sam Howell, 9, Jordan Goff, 9, Jared Goff, 10, Jordan Love. Running back 1 through 10, we're gonna go McCaffrey, Alvin, Kyron, and then Rashad White, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson. Actually, I'm only gonna do a top 9. 8, Brady. You might not agree with this one. ETN. 9, Derrick Henry, and 10, Tony Pollard. Wide receiver position. This one I've really been all over the place with. 1, Tyreek if he plays. 2, CD. 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown. 4, AJ Brown. 5, Cup. 6, Nakua. 7, Pittman Jr. 8, DJ Moore. 9, Deebo Samuel. 10, Mike Evans. Tight end position, and this will be the last thing I talk about. Travis Kelce at 1. TJ Hawkinson at 2. Sam Laporta at 3. George Kittle at 4. Evan Ingram at 5, David Njoku at 6, Trey McBride at 7, Jake Ferguson at 8, Darren Waller at 9, and Dallas Goedert at 10.
Yeah, something to note about Waller is he probably is playing. He said he may be limited, so that's something to monitor. If you have better tight end, definitely go that route. I know it's tough coming off injury to get a tight end going, but Darren Waller in the top 10 first week off. I mean, that shows you how bad the tight end position is, in my opinion. They're pretty bad position. Well, all right then. I think that's all we've got for them.
Yes, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Reach out to us on social media. Link will be provided below. Please ask us questions all weekend long. Really excited for this weekend. 3 great days of football.
Full weekend of football, man. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Yes,
and it's the fantasy playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's unless you're in a 10-team league, then it may not be. But we'll help you next week. But yeah, thank you guys for listening for this week 15 matchup analysis. We went over every single matchup. We also went over our mailbag questions. Thank you guys for sending those in. We went over our top start sits, sleepers, and busts, along with some DFS fades and tails. And then also Tanner just went over his top 10 at each position. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. We will see you next week. Like Tanner said, message us on social media. The social media tags are in the bottom left if you're watching on live. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you find podcasts, it will be in the podcast description for the BA Sports Podcast Twitter handle. Thank you guys again, and I hope you have a great weekend of football and enjoy the Saturday games. Honestly, make sure you have your lineup set.
Yep.